All right. We are back. Hey, Pike. How are you? Say something.
Hi. Oh, you didn't catch that sound. Okay,
No,
that's
I
great.
don't.
Well,
Discord does not pick up your weird noises on your audio, so it's not doing that. But
yeah.
we're back
Anyways,
with
mhm.
DS9 season 2. Now we're on episode 5, and not to bury the lead again, another A tier episode. Honestly,
Yeah.
we're so I think we're what did we hold on, let me see. I have them right here so I can just pull them up. What did we rate the other episodes of this season? So episode 1
Uh,
we said kind of high C tier. It was like, yeah, it was fine. Uh episode 2 we said we I think we were debating that one cuz we were I have B tier with like some question marks there, which is kind of my
mhm.
sign of like yeah, maybe kind of episode 3, which is the only one I labeled differently, was definitely a solid B plus, and then the past two have just been A tier. So, I mean,
Mhm.
like so far, season 2 is in a really great place, which is funny because I know we have an episode coming up soon that I'm going to hate.
Wait, which one is it?
Remember we talked about at the end of
Uh,
last episode, Sanctuary.
See, I'm just gonna pretend that you're referencing Kingdom Hearts, and just start singing My Sanctuary.
Please don't.
But
But yes, so we're talking about
mhm.
a phenomenal episode. And it deals a lot with the Cardassians. In fact, it's probably uh hold on something.
This is the most inform. Uh,
Yeah, go on. No, go on. Yeah, this is probably the most
yeah.
information we get in relation to the Cardassians as a people. Which going
Mhm.
forward, this is going to be one of the most sort of fundamental like building blocks of the story. And
Mhm.
we get a lot of characters get time to shine in this episode that have not really gotten a lot before. So we get both Bashir and Garak are sort of
Mhm.
like neither character. I mean, this is the second time Garak's appeared. I completely forgot
Mhm.
when we were watched episode 1 that he or episode 2 that's the only episode in season 1 he really appears. He's such an
Yeah.
influential character. I forget he didn't appear like at all in season 1. But
Yeah, initially he was written as just like a one episode wonder, but they loved Andy so much as Garrick that one episode wonder became a series wonder. It's
oh yeah, I mean,
legitimate.
I imagine there's probably just a lot of things they were just testing the waters with. Kind of like, hey, we're gonna throw this plot line in there. Are we gonna? Do we have to do anything with it? No, it's not super relevant, but we can if we want to. So it's like we introduced this character Garrick. Are we gonna use him anytime season 1? Probably not, but we have him now. We can use him at any point in time, and they use him for this episode extensively. And
Mhm.
I mean, I was rewatching this and I was thinking like, because there's some characters, Cisco being one of them, where we don't get to see the best parts of him until later on in the series when we first see him, right? Like, I mean, we've talked about, I think last episode. I think last episode was the best Cisco episode, and that we've
Mhm.
gotten so far. And it's like, oh yeah, we don't really get too much season 1 for him. He's a character that has to. They start him off and he's never really bad, but it takes the writers a while to make him as effective as he ends up being. With Garrick, he just hit the ground running. Like from
Mhm.
this very first scene to the throughout the whole episode, Garrick is just absolutely like a delight to listen to, and he facilitates a very interesting plot line that I think has a lot of interesting twists and turns, but is not ultimately too complicated.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
some fun facts about this episode, Pike. Did you want to share any? You think any that are relevant? It's not really too
Yes.
much of a spoiler for what we're about to discuss.
Okay, so yes, but also another fun fact I learned before we did this. So you know Bashir's actor, Alexander Siddig, right?
I
Um,
think so. Yeah, I know it's Alexander. I can't. I think that's how you pronounce his last name.
yeah. Well, Sid, as he goes by as a nickname. A fun fact about him: on his mother's side, his uncle was twice the prime minister of Sudan, while on his father's side, he has an uncle who is Malcolm McDowell, an actor who appears in Star Trek Generations, and wanted to appear in DS9, but only if his nephew Alexander was directing the episode. Anyways, back to this episode. So, uh, just some there's not a lot of like groundbreaking stuff in terms of like big secrets or anything, but Mark Alimo, who plays Ducat, he says in later conversations and such, like he wasn't aware that Ducat was going to be set up to take the blame, but he played him as a man who was being set up, a man who was taking the die because he had wanted to remove the children, and his orders were to leave them. um I will get into once we get later in the show. I'm going to kind of fight his interpretation of what happened with Ducat here because that's not the read we get. But uh, Siddiq, he actually makes a point of like commenting that he wanted to make sure that Bashir got on better with Garak. He was no longer freaked out by the fact that Garak was a spy. However, he would still be tentative about the fact that Garak is a Cardassian, which is just like, huh,
Yeah, racism
huh.
has a lot to do with this episode. There's gonna be
Yeah.
some interesting discussions of the nature of racism, especially when we get to what is arguably my favorite scene, which is O'Brien and one of the characters in this episode bonding over something that's hilariously like you would not be able to do that today. You would not be able to do
Yeah.
that today. But it's funny the way it's
Well,
presented. Um,
I think my favorite scene of this episode, in a way, has to deal with race and culture, and it's the one when we get to the orphanage, and you'll everyone who's seen this episode knows what it is. It has to do with Garrick. Besides that, the director for this episode defined it as being about humanist values, and there's no elaboration about that of like what exactly Cliff Bowl meant by this. I
yeah,
really don't think
what
this
is
is humanist
hu-
values. This is
humanist
just general
values?
ethical values. Yeah, like because I would say like you don't even have to get into humanism. You can do this in like really any like Western system of ethics. Like we would agree, like yeah, this is terrible that what's happened to them. I think the only system that would be like no, this is like all right, at least up front, making excuses that would make excuses for this would maybe be like a Confucian point of view, but even like Confucians would be like, but this is absolutely terrible and should be
Okay,
fixed, right?
maybe
Like,
I'm misunderstanding. So, what exactly would humanist values be? Because I'm a little like
so
unsure what he means by that, and like you said, he didn't elaborate. So I'm sitting here like, what do I like? Is my
yeah,
understanding of humanism like? Because I'm not putting the connection there.
so it would have to do with humanism, which
Oh
is
wow.
basically enlightenment. Yeah, oh fuck off! Don't say it like that. Don't be like, oh wow. It's like but anyway, it's sort of like it. So it's basically the idea from Enlightenment thought that attaches prime importance to humans rather than to divine or spiritual matters. But it can also have to do with like Greek. Like humanism is such a broad topic that it's
Yeah,
hard to actually write. But it's
I mean
really just
that was the
about.
joke I was gonna say because I thought I was remembering the line when you said it before we started recording. I didn't remember as humanist. I remembered it as human values, and I was sitting there thinking like,
Hmm.
ah, yes, human values as opposed to like dolphin values or something.
Hmm.
I'm just like I don't know, man. Like if you're saying human values, you're basically referring to just values in general, which is a nothing statement. Uh, and
Hmm.
but a humanist obviously is a little bit different. But like you said, it's still insanely broad. And I mean, I would say like the nature of this discussion is so much more like stemmed in the idea of perception of culture, of race, of good and
Hmm.
evil, of like ideas of even like parenthood and parentage and the importance of that in a way. Because I mean, there's a huge focus on you know fatherhood in this episode. I mean, at one point, a character specifically says he trusts another character because he's like, "Yeah, you're a father too, so I trust you in this manner." And I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
like I think those values are a lot more like discussed, and maybe that's what the person meant when we're talking about humanist values is like, yeah, I guess like the importance of things that we put value in as humans. I don't know, but
Yeah, it's so fucking nebulous because I'm really. It's like. Like, it's even weirder to me to put it on humanists because whenever I hear humanist, it's like, oh, we're going for the rational, like high-minded, like it. Usually, like humanism leads to the sort of philosophies that eventually put less value upon, like the family unit as a concept, and so it's just like I don't know. It's a
Yeah,
very
I think it's probably not really something we should focus on just because it's I mean, there's more
yeah.
important things to talk about
Uh,
in this episode, and we could start with talking about the first scene.
well, I had one more.
Oh,
I
on,
had
go
one
on.
more. This one, so Ira Stephen Bear, God bless him, but also damn him to hell. Uh,
Oh, jeez.
said, yeah. Listen, sometimes Bear is really like good, and sometimes I just want to punch him. It's very similar to when I read certain like Supreme Court justices, and it's like either 50-50, I'm gonna love their opinion, or I'm gonna say it's the worst thing I've ever seen out of constitutional law. But uh,
And here, I thought the
Bear's
controversial stuff we were going to talk about this episode were the weird issues related to Cardassians and their occupation of Bajor. But no, go on, Pike. Continue your
yeah.
statement.
So, Bear says he didn't have a lot of faith in this show at first, aka the episode. I don't know why they always say this show instead of this episode or this plot, but he said it was such an issue-oriented show that I thought it would oversimplify a complicated issue. But what got me into the show was when I realized this was not only a chance to bring back Garak, but to do this whole weird little number with what was going on between him and Ducat. To me, that nailed the character, and I knew that after that happened, we were going to see a lot of Andy Robinson, who's become quite popular on the
Hmm.
show. So I both agree and disagree with Bear here because one, the Garrick stuff is really fucking great. Like legitimately everyone. This is why it's an A tier. Like Garrick and also Ducat. But I disagree with him about it being an issue oriented show being a problem because usually when an issue oriented episode is an issue, is a problem, is when it's something very. We will have some episodes later on where we'll probably be like, yeah, like this is a little too like commentary. But the thing is, this is like, while this sort of thing can happen in the real world and does happen, this isn't like making comment on a real world situation directly. This is more, hey, if something like this were to happen, what should be our response to it? It is more pondering rather than directly commentating. And
Well, you know, and
that's why it.
it's such a generalized like issue. You know, there's
Mhm,
obviously, you know, we could talk about, you see it a lot of times
mhm,
in modern media. You know, we can cite even modern Star Trek where they'll make direct reference to like contemporary events, and you're kind of
mhm,
sitting there thinking like, do you really want to do that? Do you really want to try and, you know, pick a political side or make a
yeah,
political statement based on contemporary issues that A, you don't know how they're going to resolve, so it could severely date your product, and B,
yeah,
like you're essentially stemming your content in like modern day events in a way that really kind of limits it. Whereas you could tell a similar story and be much more vague about the, much more allegorical about the issue you're talking about. You know, we could talk
yeah,
about how, like, I'm trying to remember, like, I mean, one example. It's not even a great episode, but I distinctly remember it from TNG was the episode that related to the death penalty. Right? You know,
yeah,
that episode doesn't tell you what they think about the death penalty necessarily, but it
mhm,
sort of raises some interesting questions. It sort of says, okay, like it's not saying like, oh, this very specific person suffered the death penalty, and it was a bad thing, so we should be against the death penalty or the other opinion, whatever you want to say. It was basically saying, no,
mhm,
like this planet we encounter still uses the death penalty, and this is how they do it in this almost extreme way. But what is that? What discussion do we need to have when talking about this issue? And it's like, yeah, like you extrapolated an issue that's probably going to plague humanity forever, which is the nature of what do we do with someone who commits a crime? Like, how do we punish them?
mhm.
And if we do punish them, like, is death a suitable punishment? That's probably going to be
Well, there's
something that we're
also the
all.
fact of like how do we deal with different cultures and contexts, solutions to
Well,
that? Because it's
sure,
like,
yeah, but I guess I'm mostly talking about the nature of the death penalty is the question, right? The idea of
mm,
like that is an issue that's going to plague humanity forever, right? We're always going to have that question, and even if most of society still agrees on what the answer is, that's still going to be a question that needs to be addressed. Is how do you handle that?
mhm,
And it's like it's not relating to a very specific contemporary issue. It's not relating to a very specific modern day problem. It's no. This is something that we're always going to be talking about, even in the far future of Star Trek. And in this context
mhm,
here, like the issue they're talking about is the nature of war orphans, right? So post
mhm,
Cardassia having to leave Bajor and the Bajoran system, they were not able to necessarily bring all their people home, right? They were not able to
mhm,
successfully rescue these children. These children don't have parents, so no one was particularly invested in saving them as opposed to saving just general people within the population. And, let's be fair, people on both sides were killing each other. Maybe the Bajorans were justified, but guess what? Every Cardassian you kill probably has children. So that child is now an orphan.
yeah,
And,
yep,
there's that question of like, well, are you like, what's going to happen now, especially when no one's there to make sure the kid gets off the planet? Like, I'm not saying you weren't
yeah,
justified in, attacking these people to get them off your planet, but what I am saying is that's going to create these complications going forward, and it needs to be addressed. And of course, Cardassi's the same way. What do you do when now that there's a relative ceasefire / peace between Bajor and Cardassia? Are you going back for these kids or not? And
mhm,
like we learned throughout this episode, that it's a little bit more of a complicated issue.
mhm.
So it's one of those things
Yeah.
where
Actually,
it's a topic that's explored. But yeah, say what you want to say.
another great example of Star Trek briefly commenting on real world politics, the 2024 unification of Ireland. Sorry, I've been sitting on that for so long, I had no way to work it because you were just talking on and on. Like, fuck, I want to say it.
Oh,
I
I'm sorry
want to
that I was
say it.
talking and providing content for our many viewers. It's almost like that's what we're
Listen,
doing here.
listen. Listen. Literally, the largest party in Northern Ireland right now is Sinn Fein, and that's absolutely hilarious to me. Like
Look,
that,
I
and
understand, but that's not Star Trek commentating on or discussing like contemporary issues. That's contemporary issues molding themselves to fit into the Star Trek canon. Like
oh, so like The Simpsons.
that's the real world basically saying like, guys, look, if we want this Star Trek future, we need to do stuff according to them. So we need to unify Ireland in
I mean, that
2024.
makes sense because Sinn Fein is like a democratic socialist party, right?
I have no
At
idea
least in
about that
Northern Ireland.
topic, nor do I think we should discuss it.
Oh.
Or do you want to have one of your history rants while I go grab some more water? I don't know.
No. I mean, nah. O'Brien being Irish isn't enough of a reason. Nah,
All
no.
right. Well, anyway, we can finally get to the first scene. So
Hmm.
we get to the first scene and we see Bashir and Garak in a very similar situation in which they encountered each other in episode 2 of season 1, which is at the Replomat, where Bashir gets some sort of drink, uh, and they just start having a conversation. And one of the things that is fun to point out is that Bashir is an incredibly intelligent person. Later on in the series, we learn exactly how intelligent he is. But
Hmm.
he's also young, naive, and fascinated with these sort of like dangerous topics of like he believes Garrick is a spy, so he's kind of prodding him for questions in a way that when you look at it, it's actually fairly intelligent how he goes about it, even though we know that Garrick is essentially playing around with him. Because one thing
Hmm.
Bashir
Hmm.
asks is like,
Hmm.
look, you're a tailor, but I'm kind of wondering how you keep your shop running as a Cardassian on a Bajoran station, because no Bajorans want to deal with him, which would mean
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
almost exclusively has to rely on people who are coming into the station visiting for some reason. Maybe they're there to resupply, get fuel. But how many of those people do you think really want to immediately go to a tailor, right? Like you're on a supply run between
Yeah.
two systems and you're stopping at DS9, maybe because you legally have to like check your cargo, maybe because you need to refuel, maybe because you have some ship damage. You're not going to a tailor in your off time. So how do you keep your operation running? And of course, Garrick is just like, I like to think my expertise and willingness to serve overcome any general resentments any of my clientele have. And it's like, sure, buddy. And again,
Uh,
this is why
sure.
it's like I'm slightly afraid. Not I wasn't like afraid, but I was always like apprehensive about like, okay, how do we sell Garak as like he's probably both of our favorite characters in some way, but
Mhm.
so much of his character is in the way he says things, the dialogue, the words he stresses, and we can't convey that at all just talking about the character. Like I could read his lines verbatim, like off the transcript, and that doesn't convey it the same way the actor conveyed it. And
Yeah.
it's just he's such a great
You
actor.
have to
He's
get
such a
the right
he's
inflections and like timings
and
and just
unfortunately I can't show
oh
anything of that because YouTube would probably like mark me for some sort of copyright. So unfortunately, we're just gonna have to put this in a situation where you just take our word for it.
no no
Uh,
no no no. What we do is we just have to make a YouTube short and put Subway Surfers in the bottom half of the screen.
oh, and then we can just like watch all the episodes on Twitch where people just watch like full episodes of like TV stuff.
Is that actually true?
Have you not heard of any of that? I mean, it's not as much of an issue anymore, but there was, I believe it was like 2 years ago at this point.
Oh
People were just watching
yeah,
full
no.
episodes of like Hell's Kitchen, and they would just put it on.
See, the thing is, the one I know that's similar to that is the old the old Pornhub trick where they literally put up the entirety of the Star Wars films on Pornhub. And like for the longest time they were just up there.
So now we know a little bit about what Pike searches when he's looking for porn. Uh,
No, no, I just happen
yeah,
to remember seeing
sure,
information
yeah.
about.
I remember seeing information
Okay,
about it
you
from
said
some undisclosed meme on some niche website that no one ever goes to. But yeah, totally. It wasn't just me going to this.
4chan, fucking 4chan, probably on B. Like
Okay. I
I'm
do
not high
remember.
in
I
fact. I
do
go.
remember there was a tweet someone made that was like, "Guys, there's the entirety of the Sonic movie on Pornhub," and then someone like commented, "Bro, why were you looking up Sonic on Pornhub?" And it's
Look,
just like,
here's the thing. Implying you wouldn't look up Ahsoka or something. Come on.
"Oh
Come
my
on.
god, no, no." All right, so, uh, but anyway, after Bashir and Garrick have their conversation, they notice something a bit strange because a Bajoran arrives on the station and he has a young Cardassian child with him. The Cardassian
Mhm.
child's wearing the Bajoran earring. He's dressed as a Bajoran. And Garrick is a little bit like, this is something that's very weird. We're gonna have to talk about this because it's very uncomfortable. Garrick seems weirdly focused on this
Yeah.
child. Garrick seems really focused on this child to the point where Bashir is like, do you know him? And he's like, on the contrary, I've never seen him before in my life. And it's like, okay.
What?
So, I mean, like, I guess the biggest thing you can kind of say is like, it is strange to see a Cardassian on this station. And as
Mhm.
the only Cardassian on the station, yeah, maybe he's just interested in talking to one of his own kind. Sure. Uh,
Mhm.
but then he walks over, and this is the part that's very weird, especially with how it's said. However, knowing what we know about the series later on, anything that's read into this is inaccurate. This is not who the character is, kind of at all. I don't know why this is portrayed so differently, other than we could just say it was a product at the time. So Garrick
Yeah.
walks over to this boy, and
Can
he
I do it?
says,
Can I do it?
"I guess you could say yes." Go ahead.
And on the boy's shoulder. I hope I'm not intruding, but I couldn't help noticing what a handsome young man you have here. And the transcript said Garrett rests his hand on the boy's shoulder. So the lad bites it. Ah!
Yeah. And I love that I actually have this perfect still because I actually have him saying, "What a handsome young man you have here," on the recording. So that's gonna be the thumbnail. But then Garrett gets bit, and he gives one of the biggest, like, most visceral screams that you have to the point where I think we made a joke when watching because we also saw one of the Darmok memes recently, and I was just like, Garrick when his hand is bitten, and he screamed
Yeah,
so loud.
yeah, you made that like you made it, but specifically you said Garrick, his hand bit it. I said, and then we had an argument about like, no, he was saying Garrick when his hand was bitten.
Look, no, we discussed it. If you're saying, you would say Garrick when his hand is bitten. If you're referencing this exact moment in time, you could say Garrick Garak, his hand bitten, if you were referencing Garak's general reaction to having his hand bitten. These are
Oh
two
God.
separate
It,
contexts, Pike. It's a very, very well thought out language of memes. Anyone who doesn't know TNG in the episode Darmok will have no fucking clue what we're talking about, and we're going to sound like morons.
I mean, to be fair, I'm almost certain there is a language like that where it is like the difference is minute to us, but we actually, you know what? I constantly have to explain to people in the English classes I teach that when you're talking about a singular like thing, like a pizza, the pizza, or pizzas, it's like when you're doing the singular, you have to either use a and for a indeterminate pizza or the for a determined one, and it's just like it
Yeah.
is like if you don't have that in your language, good luck.
Oh yeah.
Good
No, I
luck.
know. I know. I know Spanish has that, but that's the only one I'm aware of that has that. Um,
Yeah.
I'm also not like super versed in most languages, so. But
Yeah.
regardless, obviously both Bashir and Garrick are very surprised at this, and because like, why would this young Cardassian child just immediately assault Garrick? And we return to the
He's scared.
offset. I mean, yeah, he's Garrick in the way he acted, honestly. But let's be fair, that we know that doesn't really have anything major to do. But something that
Mhm.
kind of happens is once the sort of Bashir brings this to Ops, suddenly Cisco gets a call from Gul Dukat, who is somehow immediately aware of this instance. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's
Interesting.
even Cisco says, I'm surprised at how quickly the news reached you. Like, I gotta point out that this he is light years away. He already gets this information. Now we know they have fashion like communication, but holy crap, man! Like his spy network here is clearly robust. If he's able to just get this random piece of information. Um,
Mhm.
But one thing that this essentially brings up is that Gul Dukat worried about this, and apparently he warned his colleagues that the war orphans that were left on Cardassia or on Bajor are being raised by Bajorans, and those Bajorans are raising them to hate their own kind. So,
Yeah, the way he says all this is so high and presumptuous. It's like high, mighty, presumptuous. I'm like,
I mean, in all fairness, that's just how Dukat talks. But
I mean, sure,
it's
sure.
it does sort of raise an interesting question, right? Because it's like, okay, so you left these orphans here. They're going to be raised
Mhm.
by people who, for kind of good reason, hate Cardassians. So, what do you think is going to happen other than these kids are basically going to be raised to think that their own kind are terrible, to the point where
Mhm.
when one of them encounters another Cardassian, he immediately attacks him.
Mhm.
And let's see. And they want to try and figure out like, okay, what is going on? Cisco is somewhat interested in how this is turning out, so he wants to investigate some of these war orphans. Uh,
Mhm.
and Ducat wants to basically say like, look, uh, hold on, I'm trying to see because is this where he asks for the DNA of the boy? Uh,
DNA. No,
no, this is
that.
not where he asks the DNA for the boy, but says Ducat does say he wants to learn this boy's story so he can use it to try and convince his fellow leadership to finally bring these orphans back to their homeland.
Mhm.
Which I feel
Mhm.
like the use of the word homeland is very weird here, considering that they're talking about planets.
It's so
I feel like if you wanted to
the
stick to the better language, it would have said to their home planet.
no, because remember, they have multiple planets,
No,
and
sure,
it's
but I
like
just
they're
I just mean like would you? I guess homeland would. I don't know if I'd refer to like a series of planets. It's like yeah, this is our homeland. I'm like okay, but it's like it's multiple lands. I get like I think it's technically correct. I just feel like it's not the vernacular you would use. I feel like it's vernacular
would you
we
say
would
father
use.
planet, mother planet?
No.
Okay, so in that case, homeland, fatherland, motherland. So, like, yeah, like it,
Well, no.
like,
I just simply mean like it's vernacular we would use, right? Like, if I'm going to
mhm,
return to my homeland of Russia, I'm going to return to my homeland of, United Kingdoms. You'd say these things, because it makes sense for us to say it. I feel like it's vernacular that would not exist the same way in a sci-fi future where we're talking about entire planets. Right? I feel like they
Yeah,
would
but
have a
here's
different
the
word that they would
thing.
use.
They probably do, but remember, we're hearing the translator.
Oh, don't fucking get us started on the translator bullshit. We will argue about that
I
the
mean,
entire fucking time.
yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's like there are things like so for instance, in Japanese there technically like two words that you can use for great, but you have to use one for certain cases and the other for other cases. Like fuck. The one that I always use because I'm usually using it to describe people, it or like act like is Subarashi is like the one that I would use for like, oh, he is great. Like it would be Subarashi, right? Uh uh Subarashi uh Gades? Something like that, right? But in the there's another one, Tashita, that's what I'm thinking of. Tashita would be, or yeah. It's basically, oh, it was great, as in it was considerable, right?
Sure,
Yeah. So,
I, I'm gonna
but
take your word for it.
when but when we translate it in English, because like the way it gets translated is, oh, we just hear the word great. It's not the two different versions. We just have it put into the one. Anyway, sorry. Translations are funny
Yeah,
in
well, but I feel like that is the reason I say this is I feel like that is a issue with the people who wrote the dialogue. They wrote the dialogue in a way
Mhm.
that makes sense to us, but didn't consider the fact that no, this is a sci-fi future. Remember that. Again, it would just be like if someone referred to phasers as like, oh yeah, we're gonna riddle them with bullets. It's like, okay, like I get the turn of phrase here, but like that's not a term you would use in the sci-fi future anymore. Just either
Do
way, it
you
doesn't really
Hey,
matter. But
Holix,
what?
do you think an ADD assassin would say we're gonna riddle in them with bullets?
An ADD assassin riddling them with bullets. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. What would the context of that be? It would just be like, we're gonna use
riddle
our
like just shoot
we're
them,
no, I
just
know, but
shoot them.
I'm trying to think of like we're gonna use our uh our our Ritalin medication to give us the focus to shoot them. It's kind of like what it's asking. It's like, hey, oh god,
uh,
you're making me remember that weird. I think it's a mod for Payday where like
mhm.
one of the things you have is like your character will constantly have like a phone raised up that has Subway Surfers playing on it when you're running around, and whenever you shoot it's there to keep your attention. It's so stupid, but regardless,
Oh god.
so immediately like Cisco wants to talk to the father or the parental guardian of this Cardassian boy. He goes by Proka. He says like, look, we didn't come here to cause trouble. And he says like, uh, let's see, yeah, he says there's plenty of others like my boy. Doesn't like him. We're left here to fend for themselves. And he says like, look,
Mhm.
my wife and I adopted Rugel. Rugel's the young Cardassian boy, and he shouldn't suffer for the crimes others committed. Uh, and then when Cisco asks why would he attack another Cardassian, and Proka says the Cardassian should have minded his own business. It's like, ooh, okay, like this is getting a little bit heated here. Uh, and Bashir's like, look, he was just trying to be friendly. The boy seems terrified of him at sight, and like Proka says, uh, so Cisco asks him, "Are you suggesting the Bajorans are raising these orphans to hate their own people, or the
Mhm.
Cardassians are saying that that's what they're doing?" And Proka says, "To hate Cardassians, it shouldn't be too hard, should it? We told him the truth, Commander. The truth about what the Cardassians did to Bajor. He needs to know, and for that, I make no apologies." So already it's like, ooh, so Ducat was right. You're basically raising him to hate Cardassians because even if it's all true, like it's going to be through the lens of the victim here, so it's going to be presented in a not so favorable light. That being
Mhm.
said, the next
So
sentence, the next, oh yeah, say what you want to say.
yeah, I was just gonna say it's sort of like because they do have to because it's like, hey, this is part of our education system, and
No, yeah, I
he's a
mean we
part
had a
of
good
it.
episode
Do
last
we
season about
not?
that.
Yeah, and it's just like.
Well, I just mean like it's that nature of if you're. I feel in a certain context you could find a Bajoran who's like, look, I tried to raise my Cardassian orphan to understand the good and bad in his culture, and we would look at that as very noble. Whereas here, it's like,
Mhm.
well, you're saying, oh, we're not raising him to hate Cardassians. We just raised him on the truth. And I made the joke when we were watching it. It's like, are you raising your son to hate Cardassians? It's like, we don't raise him to hate Cardassians. It's called common sense. You don't need to teach it to him. Like,
Oh God,
I made that
God
joke because it's
damn.
just, well, I made that joke because that's exactly what a Bajoran would think. It's like, yeah, it's common sense to hate.
Yeah.
It's common sense to hate Cardassians. And I'm like, so there's an element of like, that's kind of what he's saying. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be hard to raise him to hate a Cardassian. Like, Cardassians are hateable. And I'm like, yeah, like that's not a great thing that you're doing to this kid. But then the next line,
Yeah.
I think, throws some things for a loop because you could look at that and be like, oh, so this guy's kind of being abusive to his kid, right? It's saying like, hey, you're from this vile, evil group of people. Your species is rotten to the core. That's like, oh wow, that would be hugely abusive. That would be hugely like
Mhm.
reprehensible. But then the next
Mhm.
line he says is, to us, he isn't even one of them anymore. He isn't Cardassian. He's Bajoran, and we love him just as if he were our own flesh and blood. And you're like, oh,
Mhm.
that throws some of this for a loop because he clearly loves the boy and he clearly cares about the boy. I mean, at least he says he does,
Mhm.
right? Like we might get some context later on that sort of changes the nature of that. But
Mhm.
it's like, I guess in a way, it's interesting because it doesn't really. It's a little bit. It's not exactly racism because he says like, look, we don't even consider him one of them anymore. So it's like, oh, so it doesn't actually have to do with his race or species. It has to do with his culture that you hate. Because if it's something that like
Mhm.
he can be without, it's not a essential quality of his character. It's not something that can't be changed. It's this thing that
Right.
apparently can be changed. So it's not racism per se, but the way it's presented is through a very what we would look at as very racist. Because he's like, yeah, Cardassians are bad. It's like, oh, so that's racist. But it sounds like he's
Mhm.
referring more to the culture or the mindset Cardassians have rather than their
Yeah.
uh, not
It's
ineffable.
still
What
racist, but it's not like a biological thing. It's not like, oh, by your very nature biologically
It's not
as
like
a
hating someone for
Cardassian.
it's not like hating someone for their skin color, right? It's like, okay, someone can't change their skin color, so hating them for that is a bad thing to do because that's their that's something they can't change and it's not something that affects their character, right? Whereas
Mhm.
like it's the whole judgment by the content of their character thing, right? So he's like, look, he's not a Cardassian, therefore we don't hate him. We treat him as one of our own.
Yeah.
But it's still one of those things where it's like, again, how a lot of it's presented. I mean, let's be fair. We've seen Kira say a lot of really racist stuff regarding Cardassians, right? She's like, how do you
Not
know?
just him, not just her,
No, no, no,
but
no, no, no.
I
I
mean
know, but like,
O'Brien.
I was specifically referring to, Duet, where she's like, how do you know he's guilty? And she says, because he's a Cardassian. And it's like,
It's like,
oh,
Kira.
but
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
but yeah, so we get a bit of a complex situation here where uh clearly these orphans are being raised to hate Cardassians. And that's a bit of an iffy topic, but it doesn't seem like they're being abused, or at least this one isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So uh oh, I think this is the only scene we get with Quark. It's not even like a big scene. I don't think he has any dialogue. But
He has only
uh
one line
there is
about.
oh yeah.
Hmm.
But this is something where it starts to create a bit of a question here because Uh, Bashir learns that one of the people who is at this so Bashir or Quark is annoyed because this guy at his bar is on this winning streak, and Bashir just sort of like is there and he's kind of interested. And he's like, "Oh, what's this?" And this guy Zolan is like, "Yeah, double's a passion of mine." Uh, and he comments that he saw Bashir with Garak and he saw Garak get attacked on the Replomat. And Bashir wants to ask him some questions. And apparently, this guy personally knows the family. They personally know Proka and what's the boy's name again? It's
Rugal.
Rugal, which do you
Yeah,
think
this
is
was the guy.
yeah, he claims that
So,
he knows the truth about the situation.
well, because when they were first introduced coming onto the station, you actually, when Garak saw them. He saw Perilka talking with this guy who said, "I'll go find us accommodations, go have some food or something," as if to And they separated because Perilka and Rugal went to get food, and that's when Garak introduced himself. But yeah, it's implied like, oh, they came together, and yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
and
Go
no,
ahead.
no, no. You can go ahead and explain what this guy says, because like he
Yes.
definitely raises more questions.
Yeah. So basically, Bashir, introduces himself like kind of lightly, like, "Oh, it looks like you've got this game figured out." And Zolan, that's the guy's name. He's like, Dabo is a passion of mine." And then he like looks at Bashir and is like, "Oh, you're Doctor Bashir," and he asks about Garak, specifically, how's the Cardassian? Still has all his fingers, I presume, and no broken bones. I'm Bashir says, "I've never seen a boy take a bite out of a man's hand like that." Which, here's the thing, people: kids are gonna bite the shit out of you at least once. Like, God, kids will just bite. That's so weird sometimes. Like, like, but Zolan then says he's a strange boy, Rugal. Uh, and Bashir asks, like, "Do you know the family well?" And Zolan then tries to cover up, like, "Oh, this is really none of my business." But Bashir tries to say that, you are a witness. I just want to get the facts from the medical report. And, like, Zolan is very standoffish, as if he doesn't want to talk about it. Uh, and Zolan eventually just says, like, "I know them well enough. I heard the father was looking for uh, a new job several months ago, and I offered to help. I visited them many times on Bajor." And uh, Bashir asked, "Did you find anything troubling?" Which is actually pretty reasonable because the guy's like, "Oh, I heard he needed a job several months ago, and I visited them several times on Bajor." He never says he gave the guy a job. Like, it's very like, oh, like, if you had the means to help this guy get a job, wouldn't it have happened sooner? Of, like, something like, not a major role, but if you own like a business, like, hey, you can join this, like, the staff, like, working in the factory or something until you find something better, that sort of thing. It feels like immediately, like, sort of red flags, like, why, like, actually, why was this guy coming with you? Was it to a job? What was the situation? We never get the answer. Instead, Bashir just asks, "Did you find anything troubling?" Zolan says, "It must be trouble for that boy living like that, hated by people he thinks of as his parents, told day after day that he's worthless Cardassian scum, beaten if he even looks the wrong way. Rugal is their revenge against all Cardassians," which, uh, you know, contradicts what Proka was saying of, like, "Oh, we don't see him as Cardassian. He's our flesh and blood. Like, that's how we see him, and that's how we raise him. We love him, right?" So
Yeah.
now we have a question of, supposedly this guy who's visited them many times on Bajor saw abuse. Which, my question then becomes, okay, why didn't you report it before now? Why were you, like, I would assume bringing this Proka to a job or something. Like, this immediately feels like a setup. Like, this
Well, so
feels.
I agree with you that this feels like a setup. What I would say is, let's be fair. Who is he going to tell on Bajor that this is happening? A
Mhm.
Bajoran government. Um, and
Yeah, it.
if he views this as like it sounds like what he's saying is like, oh, this pretty much he's viewing this as almost like they are doing this as a revenge, or they're doing this to be spiteful towards Cardassians. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, I don't know if you're going to be able to actually get anybody to, like, side with you on this matter. And if you report this, it's probably just going to, like, it just could cause more issues, right? Like, we don't
Mhm.
necessarily know the complexities of the situation, but like you sort of said, is it raises some red flags because we have Gold Dukat theorizing one thing, that kind of being confirmed by the father then
Mhm.
saying, yeah, we teach him to hate Cardassians effectively, but we don't view him as Cardassian, we view him as our own. And now a third person saying, yeah, but they beat that boy.
Mhm.
and it's like this is immediately getting very complicated. It's why it's a very good episode, because I think it handles this very well. It's both complex but also very thorough in how it handles this. But then when they return to the guest quarters, and Proka is basically saying like, "Look, it's not true. I've never even like Rugal will tell you, we've never mistreated him." Uh, let's see, and then he asks like, "Is this some sort of Cardassian trick?" Now, what I would say, right, is one of the complex issues I remember thinking of when watching this is, even if you asked Rugal, he might not admit to it because he might think he deserves it.
Yeah.
There's that element of like, is this such a thorough and horrifying abuse situation where the boy's like, yeah, I do deserve to be hit because I'm a Cardassian, so it's not abuse, it's just tough love or something like that. And that would be obviously a very complicated, very uncomfortable situation. Uh,
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, that's not what's happening. So, what they present
Mhm.
is Cisco kind of wants to ask is like, look, I'm gonna have like Rugal stay with our school teacher, Miss O'Brien, just until the matter is resolved during the investigation. And Procus is like, look, if I refuse, like, what are you gonna do if I refuse? And Cisco's like, look, I don't want to have to get security here. I'm trying to handle this in a way that I think is best for everyone involved. I think
Mhm.
Cisco, like the actor, like Avery Brooks really shines in the scene because he shows a lot of compassion and understanding, but at the same time he's being firm about like we're worried about this. So
Mhm.
Rugal comes out, and when Rugal basically is told like, why am I being taken away? I didn't do anything wrong. And Proka's like, I know, it'll be all right, I promise. And you're kind of seeing like, okay, he's kind of the father's kind of consoling the boy. Maybe this isn't as abusive as we were led to believe. Um, and one thing I do really like, and I commented on it when we watched it, is Cisco speaks very softly and very like directly to the boy in a way that is affirming, but also like treating him with proper maturity. And I think it's probably meant to convey the fact that Cisco has experience as a father himself, right? He knows how to deal with kids. So when he's saying this in a comforting way that doesn't scare the boy, which the boy is probably very scared. Rugel's probably terrified. And he says, like,
Yeah.
look, no one's accusing you of a crime, Rugal. You're not being arrested. I'm Commander Cisco. I believe you already know Bashir. I'm sure all this will be straightened out in a day or two. If you want to visit with your father tomorrow, you can. Like, he says this in a very calm and very, like, he says it calmly, but he also says it in a way that is, like, assures any of the boys' fears. So,
Mhm.
let's see. I'm trying to think, where's the next, what's the next scene? Because the next scene has to do with Garak in the infirmary. Um, let's see. Oh, so Bashir's kind of saying like, it's almost like a good thing this happened. A bit hand certainly won't. It's certainly worth saving the boy's life, wouldn't you say? Like, if Garak hadn't almost had his like fingers bitten off, they might never have
Yeah.
discovered this potential threat to the boy, right? And then Garak, of
Yeah.
course, he says, "I suppose it depends on whose hand." So already with
Yeah.
just sort of the double speak here, because we know what Garrick is thinking. He's like, I don't know if this was worth me getting my hand bit, but at the same time, maybe someone else's hand could have been bit to save this boy. Like, so,
Quite
uh,
nice, but could it have been something else? It's a bit of a pain in the ass for me, or the hand.
well, and then Bashir mentions that Gul Dukat, has his efforts to resolve this, and suddenly Garrick is suspicious, uh, and he's like, "You said Dukat." Like Garrick's laughing. He's like, "You're saying Dukat wants to do something about war orphans?" Uh, and he says, "Look,
Is
tell me,
worried about
Doctor, is
me.
there a single trait?" This line, oh God, he's like, "Doctor, is there a single trait that you would describe to me and my fellow Cardassians?" Asking for the racist stereotype here. Uh,
Yeah.
And he says, would it
Yeah.
not be our attention to detail? Do you think we simply forgot about those poor little orphans when we left Bajor? Do you think they simply slipped from our minds? And who would you guess was in charge of the Cardassian withdrawal of Bajor? Gul Dukat. So
Yeah.
immediately, like, one of the reasons why Garrick is such a great character is he is able to a lot of times he is given the opportunities to explain away something in the plot that after he explains it, it feels obvious, right? when we think
Yeah.
of the Cardassians, they seem very efficient. They seem very organized. They seem very focused on their sort of bureaucracy in a way that's like I don't expect. Like one of the things they constantly comment is on their ability to keep records, their ability to track things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, the other episode that deals with a lot of Cardassian stuff, Duet, is all about how a guy made a filing system. Right? It's all about how
Yep.
yeah, this is our filing system, and he never misplaced a file. It's like yeah, like the Cardassians are a very orderly people. They wouldn't just forget something like a ton of orphans. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's implied that like okay, there's again something more going on here, and of course, one thing they also point out is Gul Dukat not really shown to be a good guy, shown to be equally as dubious as he is willing to help in some situations, but. In this context, you have to sort of parse: is he trying to help these orphans, or is he trying to get something out of this?
Mm.
Uh, and
Yeah.
then we get to a nice scene, or again another scene where so Cisco is talking to Ducat, explaining the situation that they've been dealing with, and this, I believe, is where Ducat asked for the DNA sample. Because
Mm.
they're basically wondering, it's like, look, if we do find any information regarding like this boy being abused, and we try and return him to his actual parents, we're going to need to know who his parents are.
Yeah.
Um, and then Bashir interrupts the meeting, like just before Ducat's about to sign off. Bashir sort of steps forward and he says, "Oh, excuse me," and everyone sort of like looks at Bashir like, "Oh shit, what are you doing, man?" Like,
Cisco's
you're
about to murder somebody.
yeah. Cisco gives him like a kind of a death glare, but he asks him, "He's like, weren't you in charge of the evacuation of Bajor?" Ducat agrees that he is. And then Bashir says, essentially, Bashir is just repeating the information he got from uh, Garak.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Oh, so you're in charge of the orphans, yet you chose to leave them behind. Why?" And Ducat says, "I didn't choose to leave them behind, Doctor. I was ordered to leave them behind by the civilian leaders." And Bashir says, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Cardassian political system, the civilian leaders have no direct authority over the military leaders. And Ducat says, "Who's been tutoring you in Cardassian social studies, Doctor?" Bashir makes a point about Garak. And then Ducat makes the
Mm-hmm.
question like, look, the civilian leaders are the ones who basically like made us leave Bajor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the withdrawal from Bajor was a decision made by the civilian leaders, one that I clearly oppose. And yes, they made the decision to leave the orphans behind, a decision I regretted ever since. Thank you for your concern, Doctor. Good day. So this is where we get some more sort of like lore into the nature of the civilian leadership and the military leadership of Cardassia. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
we discussed it, the civilian leaders might not have any actual authority over the military leaders, but they might have a lot of soft power, right? They might have a lot of
Yeah.
influence in terms of like, yeah, we can make we can make the military leaders' lives hell if we don't, get what we want. And we can't demand they do anything, but we can basically, I don't know, like shut down, certain trade agreements or certain supply lines in some ways where it's like, yeah, we're not going to cooperate, with you on matters that are
Yeah.
more important unless you do what we say. So soft power becomes hard power in that context. And, you
Yeah.
know,
They
yeah,
might have some like pull over taxation or something because it's like, oh, real world historical example, like Britain, like the one of the few things Parliament technically had over like the kings and such, like Charles and such, was the fact that, oh, technically for any taxation to happen, it had to be approved by an act of Parliament, and thus it's like the king has to call Parliament and get it approved and such by them, and that was part of the whole like issue there. So I imagine it's something like that. Like normally the military has the force, a will, and arms to push through anything, but there's still some stuff like taxation and such that they need the even just the tacit approval of the civilian government to get through to keep going. And yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a matter of obviously, if the civilian government does whatever power they have, which we don't have any detail on, but if they can command the
Mhm.
withdrawal of Bajor, I imagine they can also command how you withdraw. So,
Yeah.
uh, one thing that once Ducat signs off, Bashir says he's lying. Cisco asks how, and he's like, "Yeah, I have Garak." And Cisco is immediately like, "Garak." He's like, "Yeah,
Garrick.
like the tailor who you believe is a spy." And
Yeah.
everyone kind of thinks he's a spy, but uh, he says, "Look, I believe
They
there's more going on
they
than you
know.
realize." Well, and then Cisco's like, "Do you have any evidence?" And Bashir's like, I'm not sure. Garak doesn't exactly tell me what he thinks. I sort of have to deduce it, and you're just sort of sitting there thinking like, "Oh, Bashir, you fucked up." Um,
Hey, Holix,
yeah.
if if something like this were to come up in a court case,
I mean, like,
like,
what would the context be? Like an attorney making an argument that has like no basis in reality, or
like I had to deduce it. It's like, uh-huh. The judge just staring at them and just like, I'm going to kill
well,
you
obviously,
right now.
circumstantial evidence is a thing, right? But
Mm,
there's an element of like, there's plenty of
mm,
situations where attorneys will say stupid stuff in front of judges, and they're going to be oftentimes reprimanded for it in terms of like, yeah, don't do that.
mhm.
But
Don't do that.
one thing that happens is, Bashir's. I think it shows a lot of good character for Bashir in a lot of ways. I think this is a really good character scene for Bashir because I think he presents information that to the whole group in a way that is revealing. Like, oh, Ducat was immediately like put on the back foot. He had to explain his position, and while he did it effectively, it did raise the question of like, okay, so you were the one in charge of this. Why did you leave these orphans behind if you're so invested on getting them back? Or are you not actually invested on getting them back? What's the real situation here, right? And here, obviously Cisco's like, so you don't have any evidence, and Bashir's like, not really. Uh, let's see here.
Mhm.
At which point, Bashir's like, look, I'm sorry, Commander. It just seemed like an opportune moment to do it. Cisco reprimands him for interrupting his conversation. And Cisco says, don't apologize. It's been the highlight of my day. Don't do it again. I want to see if I can get.
Mm,
I want to see if I can get like his look when he says that. Hold
I love
on.
uh Papa Cisco about to slap the shit out of someone under his command. It's just great. Just like you are just absolutely fucked.
Let's see if I can. Let's see because I have the overlay. Uh. Oh yeah, the way Avery Brooks's face just changes to go from like smiling, oh, it's a highlight of my day, to a glare. Don't do it again, or else you're gonna regret it.
From Cisco to oh fuck, what was the character he played on TV before this? Fuck, was it Hawk? Was that his name? God damn it. He played a specific character before this show, and he was like, yeah, he played Hawk on Spencer for Hire, and it's like straight from nice father figure Cisco to Hawk's about to kill you, Cisco.
Yeah, and then of course like
Uh,
Dax, obviously Kyrus kind of laughs a little bit at Bashir about this, but Dax asks, why would Garrick want to undermine Gul Dukat? And Bashir says, look, I'm not really sure. I don't think he likes Dukat. To which Cisco's like, then I want to talk to Garrick myself. Uh,
yeah.
and then I believe, hold on. Oh yeah, this is the scene I really like. So, uh, we go to the O'Briens, and anyone who doesn't know, O'Brien not a big fan of Cardassians.
Oh my
Uh,
lord, who? I mean, it's so hard to know that he doesn't like Kardashian. I mean, it's not like his like standout jaw drop episode of TNG was The Wounded that literally deals with his like his trauma from fighting the Cardassians, his relations to Cardassians in the modern day, and his relations to his former captain who's running basically a guerrilla campaign against the Cardassians because that captain knows that they're building up on the other side of the like like not. I
Demilitarized
don't
zone.
think they call it. I I don't think they specifically say it's a demilitarized zone because they use demilitarized zone very specifically for the one with the Romulans. But yeah, it's like yeah they're building up again. Like yeah,
Yeah,
but
and but yeah, so like
mm,
he really hates Cardassians, and he's kind of speaking like, I don't like know why this boy has to be here. Um, and
mhm.
Keiko's like, uh, hold on, let's see. Da-da-da. Oh, O'Brien comments, oh, there's only 3 settings. I like good idea. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I assume you sent Molly over to stay with the Fredericks. And she's like, no, he's asleep. She and Rugal played all afternoon. And O'Brien's like, you let them play together?
Mm-hmm.
He and then he kind of hides his opinion and is like, oh, the boy almost bit someone's hand off. So it doesn't have to do with my hatred of Cardassians, those spoonheads. Uh,
Mm. Oh my! No, don't use the
but anyway,
word.
Keiko comments of like, oh yeah, no, he was really great with Molly, very gentle, very caring. And O'Brien's like, gentle was bred out of these Cardassians a long time ago. It's like, holy
Oh,
shit.
why
uh,
would you say this?
I mean, we know why he would say this, but it's just, oh god, that is a racist fucking line. And then Keiko just sort of like leads and goes
Like,
like, that was a very ugly thing you just said.
mhm.
And he's like, look, I only said. She's like, I don't want to hear it twice. I like the scene, right?
Yeah.
It shows his character, but it also sort of shows that like, Keiko doesn't like blow up at him, but she points out like, look, that is not appropriate to say. That is wrong that you say that. Uh, and
Yeah.
almost like in a way where she doesn't like reprimand him. It's just the way she says it is, you did something wrong. I don't even need to explain it to you, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but then when they're all eating, Keiko makes a point that O'Brien looks at it, is like, yeah, what is this weird like? Because they show a turquoise meat is what it's called in the transcript. And she's like, oh, I found some Cardassian recipes in the memory bank for our food replicator. It's a stew made with Cardassian Zabo meat. I thought Rugal might enjoy a dish that's popular on his own world. And this is the scene that is just my favorite scene because both O'Brien and Rugal look at the food and with similar disgust and then push it away. Their plates meeting in the middle as they both hate Cardassians so much. It's
Yeah.
hilarious that it's like O'Brien like really hates Cardassians. This Cardassian boy also really hates Cardassians. I need to point out the next scene we see these two in, they're acting much friendlier. They're actually
Yeah.
bonding over their racism towards Cardassians.
Oh my god. It's just
It's
it's
hilarious.
it's hilarious, but it's so fucked up. You can't say it's not fucked up. I was just
No,
like,
but
oh my.
the reason, I guess, part of the reason I find it funny, and I need to preface that this is nothing anywhere near similar. Pike, you remember how we became friends, right?
Oh yeah. Yes. Okay. So everyone, it's not Wraith. It's Star Wars: The New Trilogy. It's the new Star Wars trilogy. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
That's what we hated again.
I know that's why I preface this. That's why I preface, like, because we were in a D&D group, and we were friendly. We were on talking terms, but I don't think we were really friends until I think like at one point I mentioned,
I
I'm
was
like,
your weird history goblin you had for One Piece game.
I don't even
Uh,
think you had. I don't even think you were like. I knew you were much of my history goblin right now, but I was just like I mentioned. I think I mentioned at one point. Oh yeah, like the Last Jedi was like shit, and then like after we were done playing D&D, uh, I think we just continued messaging each other, being like, and also this part of it was really shit, and we were just like messaging back and forth for like hours of like, dude, this is the worst part. This is the worst part. No, no, no. All of this was the worst part. So man, you know what? It goes to show you, hate is a really strong unifying factor. Pike.
okay, I am everyone. I am disavowing what he's saying. I do not agree with Mr. Hollowix on this. I do not even know Mr. Hollowix about this.
I'm
I do
talking about
not
hatred of
believe it.
movies. I'm talking about hatred of movies. And also
Yes,
in this
but you
context of the
did.
show, hatred of Cardassians.
Everyone, every Cardassian I've ever met is a very kind and loving person. I do not believe what Mr.
I
Hollowix
don't
believes
believe you
about
for a second.
Cardassians.
He's my favorite character, but Garak is not a good person.
Okay, that's fair. But that is one. That's not all Cardassians. That's one Cardassian who's a shitter. Like, let's be fair. Let's be fair. Let's be fair. Just one shitter.
Look,
One
I'm
shitter.
just saying. You know, a dead Cardassian's a
No.
problem. 100 dead Cardassians is.
Holloway.
Uh, all right, all
No.
right. We're done. We're done. But anyway, I find this funny. It's sort of like this weird meet in the middle scene because like O'Brien hates like Cardassians. He doesn't like Rugal, but the fact that Rugal hates Cardassians just as much is like, oh yeah, that's right. You don't like Cardassians either. um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
because then yeah, like we see him a little bit later, where you know, O'Brien's like talking to Rugal, and Rugal's saying like, what are they gonna do with me? And O'Brien's like, look, I'm not sure. You might have a say on that. Like, you probably need to tell these people what you want. And I think this is like really good
Mhm.
advice because, like, I mean, unironically, this is something that you deal with in child custody cases. If the child is old enough, they have the ability to sort of influence the outcome of child custody by saying who they want to be with. If they want to be with the mom, they might be with the mom. If they want to be with the dad, they might be with the dad. Any sort of
Yeah.
other parental situation. I want to be with my grandmother, whatever. But the point is like, it's O'Brien giving him advice like, look, uh, you have something to say about that. You should be telling Commander Cisco what you want. And Rugel's just like, look, I want to go home. And, O'Brien mistakenly thinks, like, I get it. You're a Cardassian. You should be taken where they want to, like, you should want to go home. And Rugel's like, no, I want to go back to Bajor. O'Brien's trying to, like, sympathize with him. He's like, do you ever feel like are you sure you're okay, comfortable being on Bajor? Like, there's a lot of people there who don't like you just for what you are. It must be tough doing that. Um, and like Google's like, look, it's not my fault. I was just born this way. Um, and then O'Brien's like, look, O'Brien says something very out of character. It actually just sort of assassinates his character. He says, "There's nothing wrong with being a Cardassian." But
Mm.
no, like in all fairness, he is sympathizing with this boy. He's trying to say, look, there's nothing actually wrong with being a Cardassian. As much as like, even if he doesn't like him, I'm sure he deep down is like, I don't actually think it's like a race thing. It's just he understands the people and he's fought with them before, so he doesn't like them. Again, it's a similar situation to what we said before. It doesn't really have to do with the race so much as the general sentiment of the people.
Mhm.
And here, Rugal is like, no, no, no. There is something wrong with being a Cardassian at its core. Um, and
Mm.
Brian's like, who taught you that? He's like, look, everyone knows it. It's the truth.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh yeah, Rugal says, my parents hate other Cardassians, not me. My parents have never done anything wrong to me. Um, and Rugal says, like, look, my parents, they follow the teachings of the prophets. They've like, because O'Brien makes a comment of like, yeah, my parents whacked my bottom when I was disobedient once or twice. Uh, and he's like, look, my parents follow the prophets. They would never do that. Um, And then, of course,
And then he
Rugal starts
asks,
asking him,
"What do you think of?"
what do you think of Cardassians?" And he's like, look, you can't judge a whole race of people. You can't hate all Cardassians or all Klingons or all humans. I've met some Cardassians I didn't like, and I met some I did, like you. And Rugal says, do you know how many Bajorans the Cardassians murdered during the occupation? Over 10 million. We had a test on it in school. I wish I wasn't Cardassian. And, that sort of raises that other issue we talked about, which is, even if they're not teaching this boy to hate Cardassians, the sheer culture is going to present the history in a way that makes him hate himself. This is a
Mhm.
complicated issue here, obviously, and I think the episode handles it well. But I also need to point out the joke I made in this scene because it was really funny, and you told me not to say it during our recording,
Oh
which was
God.
when O'Brien says, "Look, you can't be racist. You can't just hate a whole race of people." And all I said was skill issue.
Oh, X. Holy sh! Do you remember how when we first started up this episode, I said, "Yeah, this is gonna be the episode. This is gonna be the episode. This is where we get canceled. This is where we're gonna go straight
No,
to
okay.
social
In all
hell."
fairness, the reason I made that joke there was because like the way O'Brien sort of presents this information is like it sort of presents racism as like an anti-pragmatic mentality in the sense of like you actually can't
Mm,
like a normal like human brain or a normal person brain cannot comprehend like you can't know that many people, you can't interact with that many people, so you actually can't physically hate all these people. Hating is like this assertive thing you have to do, and it's just not possible with that many people. And I'm like, okay, that's actually
mm,
not really a bad mentality to have. It's like it's almost this impractical thing of like you could never understand the complexity of an entire group of people enough to hate them in any meaningful way. Uh, you can only
mm.
maybe think you can hate them in a meaningful way. But of course, then I made the joke of like, it sounds like a skill issue, man. I can hate Cardassians all day.
I,
Or scrolls.
God, this is
Scrolls I can also hate. Scrolls from Marvel. They're also very hateable. But
yeah. I'm just gonna nod along and say, yeah,
Hey, you're
yeah.
allowed to have your history rants. I'm allowed to have my weird fantasy sci-fi racism rants.
They're not equivalent. They aren't. Oh, holy
I don't know.
shit!
I get just as much value out of mine as you get out of yours.
Oh my lord! Oh my lord! Oh
Okay, we're
god!
done. See, I'm having more fun just getting these reactions out of you.
I don't know, man. I'm starting to think like I'm starting to think you're Armenian and like JonTron because you're both super racist. What the fuck? Like, God, what? What? These? Oh, we're so
Oh,
dead. We're so dead, man.
oh,
Oh, and
relax.
this is like
But
a good.
we do get to a great scene. We do get to a pretty
Oh,
great scene here, which is so Bashir is sleeping and he wakes up and he just sees Garak standing in his room staring at him.
yeah. Just uh wake up.
Let's see.
No, no, no. No, no, no. Wait, I remember what he says. I remember what he says. I
You also
remember
have the
what he says.
transcript in front of you.
Come, doctor. Well, no, I actually was looking away from it. Come, doctor. Get dressed. And it's like, huh, you know? Well, like, in my brain, I'm just thinking, like, hearing Garrick say, come, doctor, I would not expect him to then say, get dressed. It does not fit anything I know. But also, every time I go back to DS9, I always have like this weird feel like, wow, Garrick is weirdly sexual. Why do I feel that way? And then he says stuff like, come, doctor, in that particular
Well, then
way he does. And
we
it's like,
also had that first scene in the episode where he puts his hand on the kid. It's like, oh, what a handsome young man you have here, and you're like, Garak, don't say that.
don't say with that inflection!
It's just not
God!
good. And but it's funny
Ah,
because this is such a hilarious scene. First off, this preface is something we kind of learn a little bit later regarding Garak's tech ability. He broke into Bashir's apartment.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but then Bashir has to wake up Cisco, and he's like, "I need a runabout." He's like, "What?" It's like, and Cisco's just like, "I'm waiting. Like, I'm waiting for the answer." He's like, "It's Garak, sir. He wants to go to Bajor." And Cisco's like, "For what?" And Bashir's like, "He wouldn't tell me." And Cisco's like, "Whoa, whoa! By all means, will one runabout be enough?" Like,
You know, this is you know how like there are people who in real life like they write fan fiction and such about Bashir and Garrick being gay for each other. I don't think that's just out of
that's not
universe.
really the stuff I look up. But go ahead.
I just imagine like I feel like in universe people see this whole relationship and they're just like, oh, he's grooming you, Bashir. Like what the fuck, man?
Oh my
You're
god.
falling for her. So I mean to be like I,
He actually kind of
you
is. We
can't.
do later learn he is not in that way, but he's actually like basically training Bashir to think like he does. And the
Yeah,
Bashir by the end of the series very much is in a similar position Garrick is in terms of
yeah.
like the way he thinks and how he views the world. Um,
Yeah. Actually, you want to know something sad from Apocrypha? From post series.
sure, as long as it's not really too much of a
Uh,
spoiler, I guess.
uh, Garrick actually ends up much more, not not like full idealism, but very much like I'm striving for the best through the most noble of means, and compared to Bashir, who by the end of the Apocrypha is kind of a wreck because of what he's had to go through to save the day. And it ends up being that Garrick has to basically care for Bashir. Uh, because yeah, Bashir
Yeah,
makes some sacrifices, man.
yeah,
Like,
he
damn.
does. But then apparently at this exact time, Cisco gets a call from Ducat. And he says, like, look,
Yep.
I'm sorry to call you at this late hour, but we discovered the boy is actually the son of one of our most prominent politicians, Khotan Padar. Um, and then, like, over 8 years ago, he was an exarch for the Cardassian settlement. The boy was believed to have died in a Bajoran terrorist attack. Um, and he has told like this politician that like, hey, your son is alive. He's overwhelmed with joy, and he wants to come to the station to reclaim him. And then Cisco's like, look, the boy doesn't want to go back, doesn't want to leave Bajor. Uh, and Dukat says, like, you want to leave him with these brutal people? And Cisco's like, look, I don't have any evidence of that
Ooh.
accusation. I can't even find the man who made it in the first place. So apparently, the person who made that accusation that they beat the boy just vanished. So
Yep.
really sort of highlights that
Fr-
before, like you kind of alluded to. That was probably a lie. Someone here is trying to cause more drama than it's worth. Uh,
Yeah, to be fair, that's Cardassians for so dramatic.
yeah, I
So
mean, we
dramatic.
actually get a resolution to something from before, but uh, anyway, after the call, Cisco says, like, look, I'm giving you the runabout. Like, figure out what's going on. I'm going to deal with this politician who's coming to my station. Uh,
Yeah.
and because Bashir makes a point that, like, Garak must have somehow heard that the politician is coming. That's why he, woke me up in the middle of the night. And it's funny because, like, obviously, like, Cisco starts a lot of these scenes, like, kind of annoyed with Bashir. Like, God, you're just following this crazy man. And he's just giving you these random leads and you're following them like some sort of lost puppy. But they keep resulting in positive things. So Cisco's like, you know what? Let's give it a try.
Let's see.
Um, and then we get to this is the scene you like, so I'll allow you to handle it. They go to the orphanage on the station or on Bajor.
Yeah, the orphan resettlement center. You could just call it an orphanage, but see, this is why I always we can't use like, oh, they didn't think about, like, this is one of those things where it's like it's an orphanage. Don't fancy it up by saying resettlement center. It sounds
Well,
very
it could
like
just be like, I mean, that could just be like a lot of these places have like semi-official names and we just call them like an orphanage, but really it's like, well, it actually serves a slightly different purpose. It's a little bit more complicated, but yeah, in this context it's just an orphanage. um
yeah. But anyways, Bashir, starts out by asking if it's the right place and introducing himself. They're trying to find out about a Cardassian war orphan, and Deela, the woman, that's her name, uh, you know, flowers it up of like, yes, the Bajorans opened their hearts to many abandoned children, and Bashir explains that the boy's name is Rugal, adopted by Proka Migdal, and they're kind of getting to the point of like it's not recognized, and it was 8 years beforehand that this adoption had to have taken place. Which, if I recall, that puts Rugal at like 12,
yeah, he's
because
about
I
12,
think it's established. Yeah, he was like 4 when. No, it was right before his fourth birthday.
so he's
I
about
mean, I
12.
guess there could have been. I guess there could have been some extra time, so 13, 14. But yeah. Anyways, um, Dila makes a point of like, you won't find anything from back then. The Cardassians were still here, and Garrett's like, but we're quite meticulous record keepers, madam. We've taught many worlds, including this one, how to keep records. I find it very hard to believe that none exist from that time. Certainly, computer entries made on a regular basis. With Dila then say, I wouldn't know. I wasn't a volunteer then. I was in the underground. And if anyone remembers, underground means, oh, she was a freedom fighter like Kira. And Garrett's response is like a little cheerful, like, really? Perhaps we have met. Which,
Yeah,
you
Bashir
know
at that point just wants
how,
to de-escalate the situation.
yeah, like Garrett, you're supposed to pretend you're not a spy slash, like, intelligence agent. Don't imply you have met members of the underground during the occupation who might not have pleasant memories of you. Do not, because it
Well,
feels very
in all
much like
fairness,
Garrick.
well, here's the thing. While he might be a tailor now, he could have been a member of the military at some other point, right? Like that's never something he's denied. Especially during a war, he might have been conscripted, or he might have been any number of other situation, right? Um,
Yeah, but the fact he then came out and said like, perhaps we have met. I feel like, oh, you're gonna try and use what you actually did as an intimidation tactic, right? But then Bashir steps in and is like, look, can we just check your computers? And Dila like says that, oh, they don't work and we can't get a technician out here. And Garrick, once again, It's just like, perhaps I can be of service. Apparently, he dabbles with isolinear data saw processors. It's a hobby of his, which, you know, he's a tailor. A very interesting hobby. With Bashir noting it, of like, oh, we underestimated you, and Garrett's just like, oh, it's no more difficult than sewing on a button, actually. Which
Well, he
is
also
just
has this
like,
like high tech monocle thing that I assume is like somehow enhances your vision to see something relating to this thing. And Bashir kind of comments like, "Oh, you carry this everywhere." It's like, "Oh, it's a simple tailoring tool." You'd be surprised at how often someone needs their pants suddenly let out. Um,
and yeah, and you're just sitting there like, uh-huh. Again, it's like the tailoring thing is a very useful sort of like cover because it's like, yeah, a lot of the tools of the trade also come in handy for spy, and it's a great cover. But
well,
Garrick then
I think
brings
it's
up like,
yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, I think uh, like we Garrick and a lot of Cardassians talk about like the nature of truth a lot of times, and there's that idea of like I don't care what you think you know. If you can't confirm it, you can't claim it's the truth. So there's a lot of
yeah,
things. There's a lot of things that he says and does that are like I get what the implication is. I don't care what the implication is because I'm never going to confirm it. Uh, and there's an
yeah.
idea there of like how it's sometimes you see this. I'm gonna use some lawyer experience here, guys. Sometimes you see this in the law where it's like, look, it doesn't matter if everyone agrees. Yeah, this is what probably happened. If you can't prove it within the rules and bounds of the law, it doesn't matter how real it is. Sometimes, right? It's like,
Right.
sir, we have this piece of evidence we want to present in court. It's like, okay, but it was acquired illegally, so we can't present it. It's like, yeah, but it convicts the person of a crime. It's like, I'm sorry, we can't use it. It was acquired illegally. It doesn't matter if it
Yep.
exists. It doesn't matter if it's going to change the outcome to a degree. We create these rules of law to ensure that justice is maintained in that context. But that's a little bit different. Here, Bashir's like, look, I'm always going to give you like crumbs of information, but I'm never going to give you the full meal. And as such, you can draw your own conclusions, but those are only assumptions on your part, regardless of how accurate they are. Because regardless if the assumption is true or accurate, it's still only an assumption.
Yeah. But
But
it's also a way for Garrick to further train Bashir, like to both
well, I mean, also like
incentivize.
it gets Garrick what he wants because Garrick is invested in this situation right now. Which I mean, we'll talk a little bit about Garrick at the end of the episode, but this is something that's a little bit interesting because Garrick, other than having his hand bit, has really nothing to do with this plot line in terms of like why he's
Mhm.
invested. There's nothing that's
Cardassian.
like, well, other than the fact that he's a Cardassian, and we'll talk about that. But you know, um,
Yeah.
so they find that the document's not there, and Bashir is like, "Look, like Garrick's like, I can go through the old files if I have the names." And Bashir's like, "Look, that's 8 years of files you're gonna have to go through. There could be any thousands of files." And Garrick's like, "Yeah, it'll be tens of thousands of files." Oh, by the way, I just found it. Uh, uh,
No, no,
so
no,
yeah,
no,
it's
no, no. He specifically says. So the issue is like, oh, Bashir, like he says, it's not here. Like Rule's name, father's name, none of it's there, and either it's been misfiled under a wrong name, or this is entirely the wrong relocation center. And Bashir's like, I'm not going to any other district until I know. And Gary's like, no, 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 don't worry. I can already access all of them from here and download them onto a data clip. And uh, Bashir says that'll be thousands of files, uh Garrick tens of thousands, and then yeah, it's like here's the thing, it's like assuming it's now working and it's connected to this network that's shared between all like these relocation centers, it's not that impossible. Like it's it probably would take more time than they show here because it's just like they have a limited time, and it's not really important to show the whole time, like, that it would
yeah. I
actually
mean,
take. Instead,
I remember I commented that it's like Garrick having these technical skills could be seen as just like, oh yeah, we're just giving a character a skill they need for the purpose they need. But obviously, if he was a spy, right, which we know he
yeah,
is, uh, there's
Yeah.
plenty of skills that he could have. Again, I think they alluded to it with the fact that he's able to get into Bashir's room with no sort of alarm going off or anything like that. He clearly
Hmm.
has a series of skills that make sense for his character, and he's able to fix and access the information within this machine. So ultimately,
Hmm.
I think this really is something that's well founded and justifiable with the character going forward. Um, but yeah, finish
Hmm.
what you wanted to say.
And then we transition to the awkward moment because then they look back, like Garrick is coming out, and there's orphans there. There's
Yep.
Cardassian orphans. There's half Cardassian orphans there, and
Yep.
Garrick is actually struck by this, and one of them says, "Excuse me, sir, have you come to take us back to Cardassia?" And Garrick's whole demeanor changes here. Like, he's no longer being like sort of that playful, coy doublespeak. He's much more like saddened and reassuring. Like, he has a bit of Cisco here, but in that sort of like depressed way of, you can't help the child. And he says, "I'm afraid not, child. Come, doctor. And then I believe you'll find your computer system fully functional now, madam." Like, this fully took him out of his standard rhythm, and he couldn't like he did not want to confront this further. And here's the thing: we will find out later on, or at least we like get the implication. Garrick is very much a monster. Like, he has done some awful things as an intelligence operative. But then there's cases like this where it's like, yeah, he is still at his core. What would be the word we would use in the future rather than like he's still human? What would we say in the future when we have other species? What would we
Yeah. That.
say, Hollow?
I mean, we could just say he's still a person. Uh,
Yeah, he's still like he's still empathetic and like tied to his like personhood and to the personhood of others. And on the runabout, they go very quickly back to the runabout, and Garrick tries to do a search, like setting up a whole data bank to do all the cross referencing, and Bashir's like, "Computer, discard that, shut down the engines." And Garrick that it's about the orphans, right? He says, "I'm sorry about you're upset about the orphans," and I think he's the one who actually brings it up for the first time that children without parents have no status in Cardassian society. The situation is most unfortunate, but I don't make the rules. We're gonna find out here soon from Kotan Padar here in the next scene, but it's a very family sort of like focus society in the sense of like it's very filial. Like, there's like you are a part of your clan, and you are, it's an honor to be part of your clan and to live with them and to be of service to them. If you do not have the higher up, it's like it's a very hard to, basically have anything in that society. And like I like with that in mind, I think Garrick legitimately does believe, like, yeah, like, as much as I would want to bring those orphans back to Cardassian away from the Bajorans that I hate, they probably are better off with the Bajorans to be raised by them
well,
because they're
so I
not
mean, well,
caught.
I
Hmm.
don't know if I don't know if Garrick would think that. There's a there's something I want to bring up about this scene, but
Hmm.
so when Garrick is trying to deliver these orders to the computer before Bashir cuts the orders off, he's obviously he's a little bit more hectic. He seems almost a little bit rushed. Um,
Hmm.
you can argue he is after seeing those orphans, he's kind of been emboldened about what he needs to do, and he's a lot more
Hmm.
trying to solve this problem. And Bashir, I want to read some of this dialogue out because I think it tells a lot. You know,
Hmm.
uh, when Garrick says, like, look, like you said, children without parents have no status in Cardassian society. The situation's most unfortunate, but I don't make the rules. Bashir says, but you do play the game, don't you, Garrick? And there's a game being played right now as we speak, isn't there? And Garrick says, there are always games, Doctor. Bashir then responds, the trouble is, I don't have the slightest idea what this game is about. So you're going to tell me what's going on inside that plain and simple head of yours, my Cardassian friend, or we're going to sit here until we rot. Garrick then says, tell me, Doctor, why do you think the Cardassians left Bajor? He says, um, Bashir says, "Oh, it's because of the decision made by the civilian leaders." And Garak says, "Oh, isn't that interesting that one of the Cardassians' most notable civilian leaders has recently entered the scenario? That suddenly Rugel's father just happens to be uh, like one of the leaders of the civilian council. This
Mm-hmm.
boy who just suddenly appeared out of nowhere after 8 years, right after, in what we remember, a 3 episode event relating to a Cardassian coup." Uh,
A Bajoran, uh, well,
a
I say
Cardassian
Bajor.
supported Bajoran coup.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
There we go.
and Bashir says like, look, uh, let's see, hold on, yeah, because he Bashir makes the connection that okay, so what you're saying is Gul Dukat is the political enemy of Rugel's father, uh, and who lost his job as prefect when they withdrew. And Garrick says, and seemingly out of nowhere, Dukat takes interest in an orphan boy who recently arrives on the station. And we discover that the orphan boy isn't really an orphan boy, but this politician's long lost son. And Bashir says that's another coincidence. And then Garrick says a great line, which is, "I believe in coincidences. Coincidences happen every day, but I don't trust coincidences."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Obviously that's a huge line for this kind of character going forward. He is suspicious of everything, and he has a right to be. But it also points out that like, yeah, I mean that's kind of just good advice for real life. It's like, yeah, like sometimes things just happen, but at the same time, if you just assume that is always going to be the case, you're going to be tricked a lot. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then we get the scene with Padar, the Cardassian who is Rugel's father, uh, and you know, it it is immediately apparent that Padar is like almost humbled by the situation. He wants to see his son. He wants to find his son. Um, he talks about how yeah, my son had just had his fourth birthday. He probably doesn't even remember me, does he? Uh, and O'Brien says like, I think he spent most of his life trying to forget you. And Padar says, I don't think I understand. And O'Brien says, look, he hates Cardassians. He hates everything about Cardassia. Uh, and Padar says, growing up among Bajorans would do that to you. And he says, like, look, I'm his father. Uh, let's see. He Padar basically tries to say, like, look, I know very little about human culture, but I don't know how you view family. And O'Brien says, like, we do almost anything to protect our families. I have a daughter myself. She's 4, the same age your son was when you lost him. And Padar says, then I expect you can imagine what I'm feeling right now. On Cardassia, family is everything. We care for our parents and children and with equal devotion. In some households, 4 generations eat at the same table. Family is everything, and I failed in my responsibilities to my family. And this is kind of what you were saying before about how this is generally not a good thing that his son has been found. Although he doesn't seem he seems more relieved to have his son back than he seems perturbed about possibly losing his station in society.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So no. That I wasn't getting at that. I was getting at the fact like oh like Garrick is confirmed with the human you know cost of what his people did, and that the human cost to his own people, and the fact of there is no good answer for based on what we know of the Cardassians. Yeah, being with the Bajorans might legitimately just be the only maybe okay option because who like because for all for what we find out Rugel like isn't that bad off like it's better if they're possibly adopted by Bajorans than Cardassians because there's better odds of it happening. Actually, a real world thing. Uh, because so Hawks, how much do you know about Japanese orphans and the issues of getting adopted in
I know,
Japan?
I know so much about it, but why don't you inform me anyway?
So it is because of the focus on family and such. There is basically a cultural incentive to not adopt. And there's exceptions, of course, like oh, you're adopting someone because they're a very capable person. It could be the heir to your family and keep a business in the family. But for children, it's yeah, it is incredibly difficult to get adopted here because there is just the cultural incentive against it because it's viewed as not your family, not your blood. They don't know. what's going on. And here's the thing: there's also cases in Japan where kids will be put into the foster care system, but the parents still technically have like legal rights to them, and until those legal rights are fully absolved, the child cannot be adopted, and that as a whole other hurdle. I can fully imagine there's all these sorts of hurdles in the Cardassian system that just makes it like, yeah, no, they're better off with the Bajorans and being like they have a better chance to be adopted there, but that still is just an awful thing to realize and like or even consider that Garrett cannot like Garrett doesn't like that fact. He wishes he could change it and fix it, but he can't. Anyway, sorry.
Well, so I mean, I actually kind of disagree a little bit about your assessment of Garrick and like what he believes there, but we'll discuss that at the end when we're talking a little bit about his character. Um, so
Hmm.
Padar just wants to, when Padar sees Rugal again, I actually wrote down in my notes. This is a very gut wrenching scene. This is uh, Rugal seems, or I'm sorry, Padar seems as if he like is desperate to just like talk to his son, to see his son again. He almost looks like he wants to just hug his son because he misses him. He loves him. Uh, and
Hmm.
Rugal is basically like, I don't remember who you are. Um, and Padar's trying to like say like, look, we thought you were dead. I cried for you, Rugal. I missed you so much. I could not even stay on Bajor. I was too close. It was too close to the happy memories of you. And Rugal says like, it was your own fault. You deserved it. You are a Cardassian. What the Bajorans did, they had to do. And Padar says, I understand why you say that. And Rugal says, you can't understand. You are a Cardassian butcher, a butcher. They killed your son for your crimes. Uh,
Hmm.
this is a hard scene. Rugal clearly is not satisfied with what happens, and then he basically tells
Hmm.
Cisco, like, we have Padar, Proka, the adoptive father, and Cisco, and he's like, look, I have no intention of allowing a Bajoran court to rule in the custody of my son. Proka says, you gave up custody when you abandoned him here. And Padar says, he is my natural born son, as Cardassian law clearly stipulates. Uh, and of course, Proka says, yeah, but there's no Cardassian law on Bajor. And Cisco's like, look, gentlemen, like, I think you may need an arbitrator to settle this. And Proka says, it must be someone that's neither Cardassian nor Bajoran. What about you? And Cisco's like, look, I'd be willing, but I'm sure that Padar would have objections considering the Federation's relationship with Bajor. And Padar says, no, Commander. You are a father too. You would be acceptable to me. Padar's a really great actor here.
Hmm.
I don't know what it is. Like every top tier actor that they got, they made a Cardassian. Because I don't think there's been a bad
Uh,
Cardassian actor yet.
yeah, I mean, so I think the reason why is just because whenever a Cardassian shows up, they're going to be a like if they're actually a central character, like they're going to be like, hey, this is a Cardassian, one of the main two species we deal with, like we have that are like thematically
Sure, but I just
critical
don't feel I
to
don't feel that way about a lot of it. I don't think a lot of the Bajoran actors are bad, but like don't get me wrong, I just think like we're hitting like S tier level characters, um,
yeah. So,
with
so I
every
think the
Cardassian.
reason why is because we get fewer of them, and they are in critical roles, all of them. The ones like we do see and spend time with, that they get the best they can. While the Bajorans, it's like there's more of them, so while they can get some standout actors, there's just always like it's just hey, there's also going to be some who aren't quite as good. Like they're still
Sure.
good,
Well, and
but the
also I think
quality
I
is
think one
slightly.
I think one issue is it's not as much a thing as anymore, but you know actors who are it'd be a thing that actors would have to train how to use masks. And what I mean by that, right, is
Yeah.
when your face is covered, you have to act in a way that still conveys how you feel. That is something that actors
Hmm.
were trained in. I don't know how much they're still trained in it, but the fact is like maybe because they knew Cardassians were always going to be wearing these like massive latex masks, they made sure that they were always great actors because they had to be able to convey the passion of like what it is that they're doing. But it's also just like I don't know. I mean,
Hmm.
if I was putting Rugal as just a random character list of like how good do I think of a character he is, he's kind of S tier. His entire scene is so complex. Like he seems reserved about the whole situation. He seems worried about his son. He wants to, embrace and love his son and bring him home. But at the same time, he seems to understand that this is going to ruin his entire standing within political society. It's going to ruin his entire standing within society, but he doesn't care. He recognizes that Cisco probably has some sort of bias against Cardassians and for Bajorans simply because he's part of the Federation, but he says, no, I trust you because you're a father. Like, there's so much complexity to this character already, and he's been on screen for less than 10 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. And then we get to
Yeah.
another pretty good scene. Uh let's see, hold on. Hold on. I'm trying to think here. Hold on. Then we have Gul Dukat arrives on the station, which obviously is gonna a bit stressful. And Cisco's like, look, you've come a long way for a custody hearing. And Dukat says, yes, but Padar is an eminent member of the civilian assembly. This matter has generated a great deal of interest in the highest levels of government. I'm here representing the child, all the children that were abandoned on Bajor. I want to see Rugal reunited with his father. And of course, Cisco and Dukat are basically playing this game of, I have to acknowledge what you're saying is true, even though I don't believe a word of it. Cisco saying, like, well, I'm sure Padar is grateful for your support because I was under the impression that you were political adversaries with Padar. And Dukat says, and I must object, Commander. The past is the past. It has no relevance here. What are we going to do about the children? That's what's important.
just you're just there like, you don't give a shit about children. You're
Well, it's just,
Dukat, don't you?
It's just like, I don't believe a word you're saying. It's like, yeah, I don't believe a word you're saying, but we have to, again, it's that level of, you're free to make assumptions, and those assumptions might be accurate, but at the end of the day, they are still only assumptions. Please prove that I'm actually insulting you in like 3 different Cardassian ways. But then we get a scene where, what's it called? Garak basically makes a point of like, oh, it was so foolish of me. Here I was trying to search all these files for a file that doesn't exist, and Bashir's like, what are you talking about? It's like, clearly, whoever orchestrated this whole plan would have deleted the file. So what I have to do instead is I have to find the person who wrote it. And Bashir's like, how are you going to do it? It's like, how do you ever hope to find him? And Garak's like, her. And he's like, how do you know it's a her? And Garak says, because I already found her. Like,
Garak, stop being a shitter and just get to the point. Damn it.
well, it's hilarious because it's like he clearly has this insane level of skill in investigating and finding people. Again, something that definitely alludes to his background. They call and they make a point that it was brought by a person who worked for the station Terok Nor. The station Terok Nor is what was later became DS9. And the person in charge of Terok Nor was Gul Dukat. So this is where all the pieces kind of come together, and we get to the schoolroom scene. One thing I do kind of like here, no, I want to see if I can get to it. Is, hold on. Cisco's talking with Rugal, and Rugal says he doesn't really remember any of these things, but O'Brien's also sitting there, and he seems to be almost representing Rugal, right?
Yeah.
He seems, or at least he seems to be there almost like for moral support. He's kind of like sitting by Rugal. He's sort of there as like I'm sort of been watching over you.
New dad.
So your parents, new dad. But I mean, let's be fair. O'Brien has an arc on this episode, and that arc started because he and this boy both hate Cardassian food.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's a little like heartwarming that, O'Brien, who started off hating this boy simply because he was a Cardassian, kind of learns, maybe it's not the physical like appearance of the people. It's not this species that I hate. It's the culture. I don't know. I don't think he's over his hatred of Cardassians in any way, but I think he's maybe learned to recontextualize it a little bit, right? When he said, "Oh, kindness was bred out of that species long ago," it's like, "Oh shit, man, that's super racist." But then he kind of quickly learns, that is actually probably not the case. It's not. It's how these people were maybe raised, not what they are, that defines them. And I mean, at the end, again, you have him sitting next to this Cardassian boy, hoping, for the best for him. He says, "Look," O'Brien comments like, "He hates Cardassians, sir. Padar was heartbroken. I can only imagine how I would feel in his shoes." And again, O'Brien's kind of on both sides. He is also a father, and if he ever had his daughter raised by a different group of people to hate humans, right, he would probably be in the same situation Padar's in. So O'Brien's a very interesting third party here who has no investment on either side. And again, we talked about this before, the nature of fatherhood, and we've mentioned this plenty of times before. The fact that Sisko and O'Brien kind of have this connection as they are both fathers, and they have both sort of experienced similar feelings in terms of like what they need to value and who they need to value, and what does it mean to be a father, and how does it affect decisions and affects who you become as a person.
Mm-hmm.
But they also make a point that while the government has not yet revealed Padar's son is still alive and therefore his position is currently protected, they do make the point that his political career will be ended. And this is when Bashir arrives to do exactly what he did before, but this time Sisko allows it. I think you're the one who pointed out that before Sisko was like, it was the highlight of my day, but don't do it again. Bashir's doing it again, but this time he trusts Bashir is making the right decision. Yeah, sure, following Garak might be a foolish endeavor sometimes, but here it's panned out every single time. So he's given Bashir the floor. At one point, Dukat does say when Bashir's trying to like take command of this room, Dukat's like, "This is irrelevant and insulting, Commander. You've lost control here." And Sisko's like, "Yes, it seems I have." And then he leans back in his chair and doesn't do anything else.
Well, I'm just gonna let the circus play out. This is the highlight of my day again.
But I'm just going to kind of read out the points Bashir makes because I find it very interesting because this is exactly how a lawyer would present information. So Bashir makes a point. Let's see. I want to get to the start of it. He says, has the news of your son's discovery become public knowledge of Cardassia? Padar says no. And he says, when it is revealed, what happens? Like, it'll be a shame. Considering the timing, it would be pretty poor. And Bashir's like, yes, the timing, because the civilian government is investigating the military coup backed by Cardassians. That was the first 3 episodes of the season. We're already seeing a lot more continuity in this season. It's like, he basically says, like, hey, you and your people were investigating the military of Cardassia for an illegal action. And suddenly this comes up. Isn't that a bit suspicious? And apparently, Gul Dukat is one of the key witnesses into the inquiry. Bashir then says, all right, now let's talk about the children. Have you ever been to the Taza Resettlement Center on Bajor where Rugal was adopted? And Dukat says, no, I've never been there. And then Bashir says, let's see. It was in a province where Padar was stationed 8 years ago. Dukat says, yeah, I'm aware of that. And then Bashir says, and I've been trying to find records of Rugal's adoption that are missing from the files. Dukat says, well, that's unfortunate. And he says, we did find someone who was working at the center at the time when Rugal was brought in. And they know a Bajoran social worker named Jormont Lusan. Dukat says, nope, never heard of him. And they said, oh, they remembered a Cardassian military officer. A woman seemed familiar with him. Even knew his name. And like Dukat's like, yeah, is there a question? And Bashir's like, no, but hold on, let's see. I want to get the way he says this because it's very important. Bashir asks, you wouldn't happen to know of the base known during the occupation as Terok Nor? And then Dukat's just like, Terok Nor? Yeah, that was this space station. And Bashir's like, oh, it was. You were in charge of the station, weren't you? And Dukat's like, yeah. He's like, well, it turns out the person who brought Rugal to the adoption center worked on Terok Nor. And then, let's see. He says, yep. And then Dukat just like looks Garak right in the eyes. Garak kind of just like smirks at him. I want to see if I can get that like. Oh, hold on. There it is. Just there. I gotta get this like still because it just has like Dukat looking at the screen and Garak just having the most shit-eating grin. Let's see. Bashir then says, "Gul Dukat, who was the commanding officer of Terok Nor 8 years ago." And Dukat just stands up and walks out of the room. He does not say a word.
Yeah.
He has been walked right into this. He basically is like, yep, I am screwed. And he just walks right out of the room. And then Bashir just says, yeah, for the record, he was the one in charge.
Yeah.
Let's see. And we got like one more scene. So yeah, basically, Padar, Rugal is going to go back with Padar for a bit. Learn about his people, reunite with his family. And Padar says, like, yep, currently they're at a stalemate. If Dukat reveals that this was his plan, then he'll be, like, removed from his position. But if they reveal the situation where my son was left here for 8 years, I would lose my position. So Cisco's like, so it's a stalemate. Neither will reveal either information lest they lose their job. He's like, yep. So for now, I can continue the inquiry. Um, let's see. And then, Cisco's like, I hope you'll use your influence to try and bring the rest of the Cardassian orphans home. And then Padar, unfortunately, looks very awkward. And he's like, yeah, we'll see. Kind of goes back to what we were saying before regarding to the Cardassian orphans not having status. Even if he's like, yeah, I want to save my own son. It's like, but you're gonna save these other kids. He's like, eh.
Yeah. Well, so I think the inquiry is not going to happen anymore because Ducat, as he said, Ducat will never allow these events to be made public now, and I certainly won't choose to discuss them. A stalemate. A
Yeah,
stalemate. You've helped
yeah,
salvage my political. So yeah, if he tries to push the war orphan thing, suddenly like help other Cardassian orphan, it's like, okay, Ducat has leverage against you, but you also have leverage to say that Ducat did it. It's just like, yeah, no, it's not gonna happen. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Just
But then
go.
we
It's
also
just
get
not.
we also get the nice scene where O'Brien is basically saying he's saying to Rugal, remember what I said. If you ever want to come back and visit, just let me know and I'll arrange it. So again,
Hmm.
O'Brien being a good third dad. Uh, and then we're back at the Replomat where this episode started, really bookending it, where Bashir and Garak are sitting at the table. And he says, Bashir asks, there's one more question I haven't figured out, Garak. Why did you want to expose Ducat? What's the truth about you and him? And Garak says, truth, Doctor, is in the eye of the beholder. I never tell the truth because I don't believe there is such a thing. That's why I prefer the straight line simplicity of cutting cloth. And Bashir says, you're not going to tell me. And Garak says, but you don't need me to tell you, my friend. Just notice the details. They're scattered like crumbs all over the table we regularly share. Until next time. Um,
Uh,
so
they ended
there's
with
a lot.
that line in particular. Until next time. Okay, fucker. Okay, okay.
But I
Anyways, go
like this.
ahead.
I like this. I like this scene in part because we can kind of make an assumption. Why does Garak not like Gul Dukat? Well, what was the whole drama here? Gul Dukat was trying to eliminate a political rival.
Hmm.
Um, I think the implication here is that Garak might have some ties to the politics of Cardassia.
Wow, a
So
Cardassian suspected of being a spy has ties to Cardassian politics? Who would have guessed? But yes,
yeah,
that,
but that's the
yeah.
point, right? All the information's there. Bashir just needs to see it. Uh,
Mm.
but I wanted to talk a little bit about Garak because I think he's one of the best characters in DS9, and this episode really is the best thing I think that encapsulates him as a character. Um,
Hmm.
we see like he clearly is a character that is very dubious. He has these skills, but at the same time, there's a vulnerability to him. You mentioned this when he saw the orphans, right? Is his entire his entire order, his entire process gets thrown off, and he suddenly looks vulnerable, right? He looks
Yeah.
as if there's this weakness he has. And one thing that we learn about Garak is more than anything else, he values Cardassia. He values
Hmm.
Cardassians. More will be revealed about the character in time, but he is banished from Cardassia, and yet still he holds Cardassia on the highest pedestal.
Hmm.
And this is why I kind of disagree with what you say. He might view these orphans as being better off on Bajor. You're
Hmm.
probably right; they would be, but at the same time, I don't know if Garak would view Bajor like that. I think he like respects Bajor so much, but seeing these orphans affects him negatively because he sees a failing on Cardassia's part.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
looking at these orphans is almost this level of the people I respect, the people I'm, still technically supporting in some manner, they failed to take care of their own people. What does that say about them? And that is something that I think
Hmm.
shakes him a little bit. At the same time, you know, like I think I remember I was telling someone about this the other day about why I think people liked the Cardassians so much in DS9, and because
Hmm.
the thing is they're both they are described as hyper fascists, and they display very unfavorable traits, things that we would not like in a real life society, right? I think the
Hmm.
reason people like the Cardassians so much, and the reason I like them so much, is they have such a strong faith in their government and their people. They believe in the systems that rule them so fundamentally they're willing to die for it. And wouldn't that just be nice if we could live in a world like that, right? I mean, obviously, I'm not saying we should all trust the government, but to have people who believe in it so much is almost like, I don't know, it feels like realistic. It feels as if it's something that's like, man, I'm almost kind of jealous. I'm almost kind of jealous that they
You
believe so
wish you could.
thoroughly in something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well, it's just, I mean, obviously, like, here's the thing. Regardless of what country you live in, right? Every country, every government is going to have its problems. Everyone's going to have different grievances. You know, maybe you're not going to like a specific political party. Maybe you're not going to like a specific policy. Uh, and that's fine. I'm not. That's probably a good thing that you don't trust your government. But wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where we could? You know, wouldn't it be nice to live in a society where you have such faith in your government that, like, even if it seems like they're doing something wrong, you trust them because you know in the end it's going to be right? That would be great to have. That's not reality,
Hmm.
but in a Star Trek setting, you can have an entire people like that. And maybe they're wrong to think that way, but there's almost
Hmm.
something enviable about people who believe that. You almost look at them and you think, I wish I could have that kind of faith you have in the people who rule you, because
Hmm.
that must be almost comforting. That must be almost reassuring. It gives you some sort of purpose. I mean, there's a million things you can write and talk about in terms of that. You can talk about the nature of faith, the nature of comfort from faith. You could talk about all that sort of stuff. And it's just the Cardassians are so well characterized in such a way around that central core of like the sort of united front of family and the government, which is an interesting
Hmm.
dynamic because usually you'd have situations where totalitarian governments don't want you to have a strong family unit because that's an authority outside of them. But the Cardassians are different in that they kind of want both. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's
There's a level of
so
loyalty and like between all that, which I like. But
yeah, it's a I get again. It's one of those things like I'm very much comparing it to East Asian systems where it's like Confucianism, where it's like yeah, the state is technically the high thing, but the whole thing is like there's a hierarchical structure to everything that you should follow. So you know the son should answer to the father should answer to the grandfather answers to bureaucrat answers to higher bureaucrat, yeah, yeah, all the way to the. It's one of those things, but instead of like there being an emperor, it's like the military, and it's just Mm, it's interesting what's going on in Cardassian society.
oh
Very
yeah, I mean, I would
interesting.
never want to live in Cardassian society. It seems horrible. It seems horrible. It seems horrifying. But again, there is a level of
Mhm.
the people in it seem to value it above all else, and even when
Mhm.
banished, and even when not part of that society, to the point of when Garak sees another Cardassian, he jumps to the opportunity to interact with them because he hasn't interacted with any of his own people in who knows how long. You know, he
Mhm.
he has such faith in it. He has such belief in it,
Mhm.
and of course, like you brought up, when he sees those orphans, that shakes him. I think, and I interpret
Mhm.
that not in the sense of like, oh, he worries these kids are never going to have a place in Cardassia. I think he looks at it as this is a failing of Cardassia. We failed to be the best we could be, the best that we are have the potential to be. There's a level
Mhm.
of his belief in that system is partially shaken. That's why he wants to get out of there as soon as possible. And to a degree, he thinks the same of Gul Dukat. I believe. We see later on he doesn't like Gul Dukat. I think he views Gul Dukat as a something that is bad for Cardassia. He wants the system to flourish, and that means cutting out the parts that don't belong. As a tailor, he has a lot of experience in that.
Mhm.
He wants to remove the bits and pieces that don't create the greatest whole. And again, it's just Garak's such a great character. This is a phenomenal first episode for him in terms of a focus for him. And
Mhm.
I mean, let's be fair. Again, another A tier episode. We're sitting very pretty this season, and I mean, it's only getting better. We're seeing a lot more continuity as well. The fact that they tied this into the three-parter, even if only in a very small way, uh, added so much more to the world building. I mean, they could have said anything, right? Like, oh, there's this political election coming up and you and Ducat are somehow rivals, right? They could have said something. They could have done anything, but they specifically tied it back to that three-parter. The inquiry into that situation where Gold Ducat was a witness. And I think again that's just something that really highlights the strengths of DS9. You know,
Mhm.
it's just I think it's a phenomenal episode. And you said Garrick is like largely based off that one character. You said something when you were looking up the little facts about the episode. The spy
What's
and the tailor or something.
Oh, uh, it's not that. It's just a subtle nod. Him being a tailor is a possible reference to John Le Carre's novel Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. Like his mechanical skills specifically are a reference to that. Where it follows this aging spy master trying to uncover a Soviet mole in the British Secret Intelligence Service. That but apparent like it's probably a nod to that. I've never read it. I just saw it. I was like, oh, that's neat.
Well, I mean, yeah, I
Like
think it's
because
probably exactly what they took inspiration for Garrick from. I mean, there's a reason he's a tailor. There's a reason he has these technical skills. We know he's a spy, right? And uh, again, I just think it's he's a great character. I'm glad we're gonna get more of him going forward because you mentioned that Irish Stephen Bear likes this character, so we're gonna see a lot of great stuff with him going forward. I believe
hmm
one of my favorite Garrick moments is near the end of season 3, but we'll get there when we get there. So, I mean, anything else you think we should say about the episode or that you want to say, Pike?
uh I disavow any statements made by Holox about the Cardassian people in this episode. I am not associated with him in any way in regards to those statements.
He's a
Please do not
liar. We, we,
ascribe
we
to.
we have DMs where we do nothing but hate on Cardassians all the time.
I
I'm
love
gonna
the
leak.
Cardassians.
I'm gonna leak those DMs, Pike, and everyone's gonna know. Everyone's gonna know your anti-Cardassian sentiments.
Wow, you say that like they're the ones I hate in Star Trek. Wow, wow. Mm.
All right. Well,
At least be
anyway,
accurate.
everyone. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. Next episode will be what is next episode's title? Uh,
It's Malora, I think.
Alora.
Malora. It's the one
I
with
can't remember
the
that one.
It's the one with the alien who, in normal gravity, she has to use a wheelchair, but
Oh,
in
that one. That's weird because that's a weird episode to talk about because there's a little bit of meta stuff that we'll have to discuss in terms of like who this character is. But it's such a. I think. I mean, we'll tell when we watch it, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be end up just being a mid tier episode. That's my prediction. But who knows?
yep.
Season 2 has been great so far. So,
Oh, hey, Bashir
all
gets
right.
some action in that episode, so yeah, Bashir.
Good on
Uh,
him. All right. Good night, everybody.
good night.